It being a little after 8:30, we'll go ahead and call the 2019 Winnebago County Board of Supervisors budget session back to order. If all members could please press their attend buttons and silence any cell phones. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Supervisor Locke. If you could please all stand. Supervisor Locke.
We seek your help with decisions today as we continue our 2019 budget for Winnebago County. Bless this meeting with your divine intelligence and help us to make the best use of our own. Thank you for being our source of guidance. Amen.
Thank you, Supervisor Locke. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda for this morning. I'll call on Supervisor Roble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a motion to adopt our budget. Okay.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the next item of business, and that is the time for the public to speak on any item on the agenda this morning or anything under county jurisdiction. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Last time, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? We'll close that item and we'll move on to the next item, and that is for communications, petitions, any communications or petitions from anyone. We'll move right down to reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Any other reports from committees and commissions and boards? Okay, we'll move right down to the County Board Chairman's report. So first of all, I wanted to let you know that Supervisor Hogan, Supervisor Gabbard, and Supervisor Borchert asked to be excused today. Then wanted to also kind of remind you of our process. So today, we will first start with the Treasurer's Department, and then we'll continue to work down in sequence just like we did yesterday. Once we've completed all departmental reviews, that's when we'll take up any budget amendments and vote up or down on those amendments. Once we're done with voting on those amendments, then we'll vote for final approval for the budget as amended. Now, anytime during this process, though, you can write up an amendment and submit it, and you'll see throughout this process at different times they may be distributed. Doug Petrosic is in the back. He can assist you with those forms and how to complete those as well. He's raised his hand. He's right in the back there, so he can assist you with that process at any time as we go throughout our morning. And then I want to remind you, it's County Government Day. So the students are here. They're moving about the building, taking a look at various departments. And so as a reminder, we have a luncheon at 12 noon today. That's at the American Legion. County Clerk has tickets for the luncheon. It's $6.50. We will break sometime a little before that to give us enough time to travel over there. Did want to kind of remind you that the location is a little different, so wanted to make sure that everyone knows that location. So it's at the American Legion, 1332 Spruce Street. And just want to make sure that everyone knows how to get there. So Mr. Fink, the assistant to the county executive, did provide some information, but essentially you're going to go north on Jackson, left on West New York Street, and then right on Spruce Street. So it's 1332, so you can plug that into your GPS, just making sure that everyone knows the correct location for that. Immediately after lunch is when the students will come here. So after lunch, they will have an opportunity to sit in your all seats, and we will talk with them about county board and the county board function and give them a flavor of what we all do here. Okay? Any questions in regards to the process for today? So Lunch is at 12 noon, so at some time before 12 noon, between 11:30 and 11:45, at some point between that time frame, we will break for lunch to give everyone enough opportunity to drive over there. And then it would likely be approximately 1:30. And if we have an update in terms of the students, because they're working through that, I'll give you an update as we move through this morning sessions to try to give you a little more clarity with that timing. Okay, so moving on, we'll continue with the departmental budget reviews. So I'll call on Executive Harris for the treasurer's budget.
The treasurer's budget, the chart of staff is on page 116. They have 4 full-time employees, the same as last year. Thank you. We're on the treasurer. The chart of personnel is on page 116. And the list of significant changes is on page 117. The Treasurer's Department was showing, I believe, net revenues, is that correct? Of $492,000 last year. This year it will be $495,000.
Any questions or comments in regards to the treasurer's budget? Seeing no call-ins, we'll go ahead and move to the next budget, and that would be the county clerk budget.
The county clerk budget is on page 100.
Excuse me, Executive Harris, we had one call-in right at the end there, so I will call on Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add a quick question in regards to that agricultural assessment increase. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
The treasurers in the back of the room could probably answer that better.
The ag use conversion charge is property that is used as agricultural is assessed at a lower value. And if you take land out of agricultural and put it into, say, a developer is going to develop 20 acres, there's a charge for taking land out of agricultural. The state determines how much that rate is per acre, and the assessor notifies us how many acres to assess that charge to. So the ag use conversion charge is really to preserve agricultural land in Wisconsin, and it's not necessarily a penalty. It used to be called a penalty, but they changed that wording. But that you are going to have a charge for taking land out of that agricultural assessment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. We have one other speaker, Supervisor Powers.
Actually, mine's for the county clerk.
Okay, very good. So any other speakers in regards to the treasurer's budget? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the county clerk budget.
The chart of personnel for the county clerk is on page 100. There's 3 full-time and 1 part-time employee, the same as in 2018. And the significant changes, let's see if I can get to it, are on page 102. And the tax levy is going from $209,000 to $213,000. And the county clerk budget fluctuates with the number of elections that will occur in a given year.
Okay, questions and comments? We'll first start with Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to go on record as saying how much I appreciate all that Sue and Julie and their staff do for us every month, but sometimes on a day-to-day basis, answering questions and getting information out to us. And I want to say thank you to Sue and Julie and the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. I certainly echo that. They assist in so many ways, so certainly appreciate that as well. Thanks, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sue, this is in regards to your accomplishment in 2018, number 6, and your goal in number 3 in 2019. When I was at the NACO Legislative Conference, they said that the federal government was going to provide states for more election security. And I'm just curious if any of that money trickled down to Wisconsin and to you, since we have an election coming up in a week.
Thank you. The state is getting more money from the federal government, but it's not trickling down to the counties. However, they are using it to implement more training, and they've given us access to more cybersecurity training as well as access to their personnel. And we've been working closely with them. We've set up some training already for our municipal clerks. We had it a couple of weeks ago. Linda Coleman from the Emergency Management and our IS department has worked really closely with us to make sure that we're on task and all set. So that's kind of where that federal funding is helping the counties as well as municipalities. They're really trying to reach out to individual municipalities and getting their town and boards and city councils on board to realize the importance of cybersecurity when it comes to elections and the access that the clerks have when they use the WIS-vote function at the state. That's really where they are most concerned that people might try to infiltrate or get into that system and affect the voting lists, and not so much results, but the actual list of voters. So we are seeing benefits, but we're not getting the money directly.
Thank you, Sue.
Sure.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sue, could you elaborate more on steps for security that have been taken through the county clerk?
Sure. I've got to say thank you so much for approving the funding for the cybersecurity position in IS. We count on them immensely to help us to make sure all of our election server, we have a standalone election server that we use, and their help in assisting us in making sure that we're meeting all the necessary qualifications or requirements to keep that secure. It's really helped, having them as our backup. We work with our vendor. It's very important. The vendors are all aware, obviously, of the dangers and the things that are out there that we have to be aware of. So they work closely with our IS department as well to make sure that we're meeting all those security requirements. I've also been part of, Homeland Security has reached out and is working very closely with the states and the counties as well to make sure that we're all on board. A lot of the information they provide the county clerks, those of us that have signed up for their mailing list and to be included in their tabletop discussions and their webinars, a lot of it goes over our heads because of the technicality of it, but that's where Jay Schaefer, our cybersecurity person in IS, as well as other people over there have really, really helped us to make sure that we're meeting those requirements.
Thank you. In another vein, I believe that in the past, you have served on the Wisconsin Counties Association Health Insurance Board.
Yes, yes.
Would you be able to share with the board some insights that you've gleaned from that? Because we are a member group of the WCA Trust. And of course, you being in a position on the board, you're right at the nexus of the information coming down the pike. And if you could share with us some of the insights that you've gleaned.
Okay, now I'm sorry, I was on it. Since the county became self-insured, I had to step down. So I'm not on it any longer, so I'm probably not going to be able to give you any current answers to that. I did enjoy the time I did serve on it, but again, it's been a couple of years, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sue, I remember last year I had asked questions kind of about printing and postage costs. I was just curious how that's changed since last year. And I'm looking at the budget. Is it under operating? Is that where the paper? Because I see a print duplicate and postage and box rent on page 106.
Let me check here. A lot of the cost savings for postage and copying, when it comes to the county board, is actually in the county board's budget, would be reflected there. Yeah, we don't take that out of mines per se. However, when we do mail out meeting agendas and things, that has come down a little bit. And we do so much now more electronically that we don't mail out nearly as much even from our office.
Okay, good, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and move on to the next budget, and that would be facilities and property management.
The Facilities and Property Management Chart of Personnel is on page 193. They have 39 full-time employees, the same as 2018. The chart of significant changes is on page 194 and 195. Their levy is increasing from $5,569,000 to $5,609,000.
Any questions or comments in regards to the facilities and property management budget? I'll call on Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, if this question was answered, we had an outage with Spectrum yesterday, and I didn't get all my emails. I had a couple of questions. One was that we were told in this budget that we're expecting a greater than normal snowfall. How do we know that? Also, there was a line on page 195 about small equipment. It listed as small equipment 53522, and I'm wondering about, could we have renewed the warranty coverage on the equipment repair on line 54029? Those are my questions.
Mike Elder, our director, is in the back. I think he can answer your questions.
Okay, I'm sorry you didn't get the email that I sent you, but when I do my budget, I'm paying attention to the National Weather Service, and the utilities have been sending me out information that basically forecasts what it's going to look like for utility costs and for the weather for the coming year. And when I did the budget back in May, they were calling for a colder and snowier winter.
Okay.
And then the other one, that was a cost that we get. It's a cost sharing for the radio system.
Okay.
For the county. So that is our portion for it. And I do believe that is like an extended warranty on the radios.
Okay, because it's like a 419% increase on equipment repair, and I'm just wondering what,
Last year I had it in a different account.
Oh,
It was
okay.
54029.
okay.
Or it's going in 54029 and it was in 74029.
Okay.
So it's just swapping different accounts.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was a request I had shared yesterday, and the executive said the proper person to address it to would be the facilities director. Could you give us an accounting of the status of the remodeling, security, windows, and tunnel here at the courthouse?
The security project's done, the remodeling project is done. We have gotten approval from the state to go with a project to replace the windows instead of rehabbing the windows, and the architect is working on getting the paperwork and the designs finalized and through the state to get that approved so we can go out for bidding.
Okay, and the tunnel issue, is that inspected or?
The tunnel issue is just in limbo. The tunnel is not being used by anybody other than pre-approved people, so we're maintaining it the best we can right now.
Okay, and then moving on to the administration building, how has the transition to that facility gone with the departments are all out of the courthouse?
I believe that's,
Resettled?
I haven't heard any complaints other than normal.
Is there any other capacity at the administration building for other departments to consolidate, or is there a?
There is a little bit of room left for expansion if we need it. but it's kind of spread throughout the whole building right now, so it's not like we could take a whole nother department easily that's a larger department and put it in there. There are a couple areas that could accommodate smaller departments, but right now I don't know of any department that would need to go in there or could go in there and still provide the services that they that they do to the public at where they're at.
I remember when we toured the building that there was a large room that would possibly house a county board, or at least an abbreviated fashion of the county board. Is there any back burner thinking in terms of moving the county board room to the administration building?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Snyder. Oh, excuse me, I apologize. It's Vice Chairman Egan, then followed by Supervisor Snyder. Vice Chairman Egan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for our county executive. This could go in two different committees, but I'm going to ask it in this one. About a year ago about this time, motion was made and seconded by this group to go ahead and do something with the airport. And it's been held off now, and I believe it's been held off by you. And I'm wondering how long this is going to go on before something's done, and what sense does it make for this committee to go ahead and vote on something if you're not going to follow through on it?
I understand your point exactly, that the board put in an amendment with a certain amount of money, and they seem to be directing to have us knock down the newer portions of the terminal and move all of the service into the older portions of the terminal. But we were in the process of hiring a new airport director. I wanted that airport director a chance to study it. I believe there's some movement on the facilities committee as to whether that was a good idea or not, as well as there had been estimates prepared by the facilities department on a number of options. And all three of those options cost more than the amount of money placed in the amendment. So, to be honest, I don't think it was possible to carry out the intent of that amendment. But as county executive, I don't have to spend money just because it's in the budget. And in this case, it was a pretty clear case that it was an insufficient amount and probably not in the best interest of the county to move forward with that proposal that hadn't gone through our proper vetting process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Next speaker is Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike, on page 200 at the bottom under contractual services, we have two line items, 55003 and 75003, both are snow removal. I think I know the answer, but can you tell us the difference between those two, please?
The account that starts with 55 is for contracted services with outside contractors. So we have outside contractors that do the snow removal up at Neenah Human Services, and the 7,500 account is the cost for having highways do our lots at the other buildings.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Next speaker is Supervisor Singstock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael, in your capital projects area, there are two projects. There's a fifth floor remodeling, and there's demolishing of 4 buildings. Would you update the board on those two projects, please?
In the capital project, that was put in there prior to the courts relocating in the building. So that was a specific request I had from the judge that was up on the 6th floor in branch 5 at the time. So he's no longer up there, so that project is probably going to be shelved until, I don't know if it's Judge Bissett that's up there. Whoever is up there right now, if they want to rearrange or reconfigure their courtrooms, you know, that'll come forward as a different project. And then, trying to remember, what was the tearing down of the 4 buildings? Yeah. I'm hoping to come forward to the county board in the next meeting with a request for the funding to tear those down.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Supervisor Singstock. Next speaker is Supervisor Defferty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the increase of all the backlogged building repairs. That's quite a substantial increase. I'd like to get an idea of why there was such a backlog for some of these projects. And, are we going to be, catching up with all of that, for 2019? Will we continue to see a backlog for the following year?
Well, every year we take a look at what equipment we need to replace and what repairs we've come up against. And we try to plan that out. And this year we have a couple bigger ones. Let me get to that page. But basically what I've presented to the county board is if you take a look at trying to maintain buildings for 50 years, you should take 2% of the value of the building and have that as repairs and capital improvements over the life of the building. The value of the buildings that I take care of, we aren't funded at that level. My budget would be like 2 to 3 times what it is right now if we wanted to budget it the way you should if you don't have a backlog of any projects. So to answer your question, there's always going to be a backlog. I mean, I own a house, I've got projects that I can't afford every year too. But we do our best with the funding that we can. Every year when I take a look at our budget, I have a target that the county board, the county executive has given me, and then we look at all of the priorities of our department. We've got labor that we have to pay for, we have utilities we have to pay for. Those are taken out of there, and then we see, the courthouse is the oldest building. What is going to go wrong in the courthouse, and we try to plan for it. So let me try and get to my page where I've got the summary. Well, we have an outside vault that we found this past year at Oshkosh Human Services that we're estimating is going to cost $45,000 to repair and re-waterproof. It's leaking water into the basement. That happened just this past winter. So, we ended up with some pretty large projects. We've got, let me see. We've got some repairs out at the jail. The jail now is going on 16 years old. So, there's repairs that we have to do out there for about $30,000. We've got we went through a long process with FEMA this spring, taking a look at what it would take if we had a major malfunction of the utility grids or a major natural disaster. So we've got some plans that we're trying to upgrade our buildings that we can have a continuity of government, and that we're not totally shut down because of a loss of power or a major weather event. And, that's $40,000. It starts, it's not cheap to keep our buildings up, replacing just common things.
Understood. Do you think that you could, just going forward, maybe in the next week or so, just send an email to either me or maybe the rest of the county board as well, a list of all of those backlog projects so that we can take a look at them?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferty. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to pose this question to the Corp Counsel, if I might. Dovetailing Supervisor Egan's thoughts and comments in regard to this airport terminal, which was approved last year in the budget, I believe an amount for $1.1 million, if I'm correct. You're stating, Mr. Harris, that we put it in the budget, but you don't have to spend it.
That's correct.
And is there concurrence with Corporation Counsel?
There is, because I was asked to look into the question by Supervisor Egan and the research, and I agree.
In contrast, if there is a resolution passed by this board appropriating that money, then he does have to follow the resolution. This is the legislative body, and if we're circumventing the intent of the body, I'm quite concerned about that.
You need to look at the actual statute, and the statute does
Could you please speak into the mic in the front table, just so everyone can hear you?
Thank you.
What you would have to do is look at the statute, and the statute vests the authority in the county executive. At least that was my interpretation. So Mr. Harris does not need to spend the money that was allocated for that. And I don't have it with me, but I can certainly give you the statute. I think I had provided it to Supervisor Egan or some other people, but that would not be an issue. I can certainly provide that to you.
In contrast, if we pass a resolution approving that project, does he have to follow the resolution of this board?
That doesn't take away the statutory language, which essentially vests the administrative authority with the county executive.
Even by resolution?
I believe so, yeah. I will look at the language again.
Well, I have to, in theory, think, well, doesn't he have the authority to veto something? And if he does not exercise that veto, he's waiving that? I mean, because that's his authority, is to veto. And if he chooses not to veto, then he needs to follow the resolution of the board.
He has the authority to veto,
Yes.
it's pretty clear. But also, if you look at the actual language of the statute, I think it also gives him leeway in ways other than the veto.
Okay.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next
You're
speaker, Supervisor Warnke.
Okay, the first, there's two items I want to talk about here, and so for some reason, Mr. Fari's explanation or question, I just want to put out that our new director at the airport is working extremely hard and coming forth with a plan on what to happen in the future. And I'm asking if people would just have a little patience and wait, and he is going to give a presentation to the board on this, I believe in January. And he's going to explain what's happening with the new plan. And all I can say is he is working extremely hard on it. Yesterday he put the presentation out to the Rotary Club on the north side, and that was his first one, and he will be bringing it forth. So if people can just have a little patience, and we will work this thing out. Now, the next thing that I got to do with the facilities is, Mike, you could make our life extremely much easier if you would consider putting in a second exit off of the parking lot at the administration building. There's only one handicap spot out in the front of it now, and that's pretty much taken up all the time. And it's also a little bit harder to find a parking spot to park around that entrance. Now, if you had that entrance open, and I'm only asking during the day that you keep this entrance open, and then you can lock it at night. But the other problem that we have is the veterans. We are now having a lot of conferences with people and veterans who are having problems, and we do have these at night. So we don't have security there, but they're trying to work that out. So I guess the main thing I'm asking is if you would consider to put another entrance off of the parking lot, and I think it would make things a lot easier.
It would be easier, but I can't make that entrance handicap accessible. And then that entrance also puts the public back into what is considered the secure area of the building where employees only are. So we're pretty much stuck with the one entrance off of Otter Street.
Well, why do you say where employees only are? I mean, they come right up the steps, don't they? And they're in the hallways?
And that's behind secure doors where they have access to all the rest of the employee areas that we set up as a security zone during the remodel of the building.
Okay, so I guess we're not gonna get this. Okay, that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Supervisor Warnke. Next speaker is Supervisor Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. Mike, about a year ago or something like that, you were telling us about the condition of some of the trees that we're losing and also replacing some of those. Is that still ongoing at this particular time?
That is an ongoing project. We spend about $30,000 a year on tree maintenance. A number of years ago, the picture was painted pretty badly about what emerald ash borer was going to be doing to us, and we have not noticed as dire a situation as what was predicted. So we are taking down a number of trees every year, and we're replacing about 15 to 25 trees every year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Ellis. Next speaker is Supervisor Albrecht.
This is for the Corporation Council. Could you get us a Attorney General ruling on the veto process, and like what Mr. Farley talked about, if something's brought in? It was always my interpretation that you brought something in on a resolution, that it couldn't be, that had to be followed through with. So I would like an Attorney General ruling on that question.
I can certainly provide you with the statute. I do not know
I don't want a
what the...
statute, I want the Attorney General's ruling.
Okay, well, I don't know...
Because you said before that what you thought, so I want to know what the Attorney General says.
And I understand that. And I can certainly, I don't know what the past practice was in terms of reaching out to the Attorney General on things of this nature, but I can certainly speak with my predecessor and can respond back to you.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Seeing no other speakers, that'll conclude the Facilities and Property Management budget, so we will move on. Thank you, Director Elder. We'll move on to the Sheriff's budget.
The sheriff's budget, chart of personnel is on page 236. There'll be 203 full-time employees and 5 part-time employees for a total of 208. That's the same total in the prior year, but in the prior year, there was 5 less full-time employees and 5 more part-time employees. So the net effect is that 5 part-time employees are switching to full-time. There's a chart of the significant changes in the budget on page 237. And the sheriff's budget levy is moving from $20,827,000 to $21,103,000.
Any questions and comments in regards to the Sheriff's budget? I'll call on Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff Motz, could you explain to us the status of the criminal justice study that was not approved by the board because it was labeled a jail expansion, and those terms were anathema to the board's thinking. And really what you were doing was trying to get a handle on the status of a criminal justice situation and then improve conditions in the county public safety area.
That's correct. So the study did not pass. There was a piece of that was dealt with jail expansion should the need arise, what type of housing, et cetera. So that was defeated, and it has since gone to Safe Streets Committee. The district attorney is heading up a subcommittee, and they are in the process of evaluating where we're at in regard to diversion programs, where we are in regard to our current jail count, and if there is a way to reduce our current jail count. He truly does hold the key to our jail count. He's the one that places people in jail other than probation and parole. So probably the right person to head up that particular committee. By April of 2019, he will come back, and by then we could see a decrease in our numbers, or we could see us continue to hold or rise, but we will also have an evaluation of our current diversion programs. Remembering that diversion programs don't always result in less people in jail, because you may have somebody on a diversion program that would have gone to prison, but now they're on a diversion program, and if they violate during that diversion program, their sanction is jail. So they may have been in prison for 2 years, but now they're doing 30-day, 20-day, 10-day stints in our facility. Now, it's best to keep them in the community, but also understand diversion doesn't mean that they're automatically not going to spend any time in our facility.
So there's no money that's required through amending the budget to permit your department to complete the study at this time? You're not asking for it?
No, I'm not asking for any additional money. The district attorney is going to report back to Safe Streets in April. Now, that is not going to give us a projection for jail count numbers. That is just merely what can we do for an immediate response to where we're at. And we'll allow that to work, and then we will begin that process, if needed, to reevaluate for a study.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Albrecht.
I'd like to take this time to thank the sheriff with all the commotion that's going on in the country, with all the jail stuff and all the disagreements that are going on, for keeping our county clean and clear. So I'd like to thank you and your staff for doing a good job with our jail and your department.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. I certainly echo that. As I've told this board before, I have a brother who's a police officer, so special place in my heart for law enforcement. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Supervisor Lautenschlager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sheriff Motz, we had a presentation at the Human Services Board by the new AODA council that the Human Services funds and works in the jail, and I heard that's going very well, especially with our main concern was aftercare after they got out, to make sure that they're hooked up with services and whatever. But one of the other things that she talked about is that they're in a process of getting together with other counties around the country that already do kind of a little survey for mental illness when they come. Well, every inmate that comes into the jail, they do like a 4 little question survey just to see if there's any kind of mental illness problem with them or whatever. I was just wondering what the process of that's going, or how is that implemented yet, or is it going to be implemented?
Well, we are obviously looking at the possibility of creating a mental health court. So part of that would be the assessment of those that are coming into our facility. But it's more than the 4 questions that you are discussing doesn't give us enough information. So Outagamie County actually assesses those people coming in at a much greater level. We just don't quite know how we're going to do that, given the amount of the bookings that we have, 6,400 during the year, and the staff that we have. Now, we are getting a new records management system for the jail, so we're hoping to implement some of that when that new records management is implemented, which I believe is December timeframe of this year. So it's not as simple as asking the 4 questions. It's more of an assessment to truly determine whether or not we have a mental health issue.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Lautenschläger. Next speaker is Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, so on page 239, I'm looking under public services and for telephone for revenues. Is that, so for 2017 actual, it was 261,443. Is that all just from inmates using the telephone to call, like a loved one or something like that?
What's the account number?
Sorry.
What's the account number?
45009.
Yes. Yes, it is.
How much do they charge per, is it charged per phone call, or how does that work?
I believe it's 21 cents a minute, if I remember. The board just approved a contract about less than 6 months ago, and I believe it was 21 cents a minute, which is very much in line with what others are charging.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker, Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is directed at courthouse security. Back in September, I was fortunate enough to go to the Counties Association, where I attended a breakout session presented, I believe, by the Marathon County Sheriff. He talked about their ability to use, I guess, new recruits, maybe, if you will. I think he used a farm system in the courthouse security as the 3 folks downstairs. Just a question, are those all full-time employees that are receiving full benefits, or may there be a cost savings with newer folks, utilizing them in that role?
Well, certainly a new employee is less expensive than one that has topped out on wages. However, understand that when you create what is created down there, that is, and I'll use like a military term, a choke point for an encounter to happen. So if someone wants to do something to you or to anybody that's visiting this building, it's got to happen down there now. I am uneasy using someone who doesn't have the experience that those 3 deputies have. So we have some, and I hope you're impressed with them. They are very, very, very good employees. And the reason, not only because of their experience on patrol, but also because of their demeanor and being able to calm people down. I have shown video instances to the Judiciary Committee of altercations that have occurred right down there at that particular entry, and others that have occurred right here. That's why we use them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Next speaker, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, the last account on line 239, is that energy rebates? Is that a one-time thing, or is that going to be a yearly thing, the $60,750?
That is a result of our propane squads going to propane and using an alternative fuel. We just found out we did not get one of those particular grants. However, the rebate was, there's a rebate, and I believe it was 60 cents a gallon. It's now 80 cents a gallon. It's set by the federal government. So we will be able to get that rebate. That is something that the federal government or the president has to approve. Has in the past. There was a short lapse where it was not, but the current president has renewed that, and we will be putting in for that. So it should be yearly, and we will watch it very closely, as well as continuing to apply for those green fuel grants, which are, we're finding out, actually occur quite often, and we'll stay on top of it.
And my second question, the temporary employees account 51101, could you explain the 52% increase for this year?
Sure can. The main increase was from giving our reserve deputies a raise. So we gave them what amounted to about a $3 an hour raise. We took them, actually it was a little bit more than that. We took them to about $20 an hour. So these are deputies that are certified law enforcement, and they assist us at special events. They assist us with prisoner transports. It's kind of what was discussed earlier by using a little cheaper employee in certain situations. We're able to actually offset overtime by using a $20 employee versus paying a deputy at full rate at $50 an hour with overtime. So that's where that increase is, but there's an offset that we're seeing in overtime. We actually estimate it to be about 800 hours of overtime. That's substantial.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker, Supervisor Lautenschlager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got one last question that I forgot. For your law enforcement officers, I mean, we purchase law enforcement vehicles. For your detectives and your inspectors or whatever, what types of vehicles do they normally drive?
Typically, they're Ford Fusions. We are looking at a Chevy Equinox, which is kind of a crossover vehicle for our detectives. That's what we have in the budget this year. It's $24,000, and that is to really haul a lot of the crime scene equipment, which we can't fit into a Fusion. But typically, it's a Fusion type vehicle, which comes in about $22,000.
So about 22 or 24,000 is what.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Lautenschlager. I'll call on the county executive. He had a couple of follow-up points in regards to the sheriff's budget, and then we'll move on to Supervisor Defferting.
I actually wanted to ask a question. There's a lot of talk about what the right level of incarceration is for the state. And at the last Safe Streets meeting, one of the judges commented on that, and I wanted to get your opinion, that it was suggested that if the state wanted to reduce their prison population, that some of the things they might do is change sentencing guidelines for shorter sentences, and perhaps change the mandatory minimum sentences as well. What effect would that have on the jail if sentences were reduced from over a year to under a year?
Any sentence under a year would be served in our jail. So by reducing their population, and go back to the diversion programs, we're helping the state out, and we're helping ourselves out. And again, I believe in diversion, but it is not a cure-all for our jail population. And as the county exec stated, as they change sentencing guidelines and as they look to reduce their population, they pass that on to us.
Thank you. Next speaker is Supervisor Defferting, followed by Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to go back to that telephone line item. Now, if I recall correctly, you said that it's currently at 21 cents a minute. Is that correct? Okay. And that's a contract that you have?
Yes.
Okay. And this is something that you put out for bid to several other providers?
We have not for a while, but yes, originally it was put out to bid. We just exercised I believe a 3-year extension to the 5-year contract.
Okay. I'd certainly like to see if we could reduce that, from 21 cents a minute. I'd like to see that reduced down somehow, some way. I don't know if that requires any more aggressive bargaining with the providers, but I think that 21 cents a minute is a bit high. I think I'd like to see that cut in half. Ultimately, that's my goal. That's all. Thank you.
If I might, any time that we cut a revenue source, then it's put back onto the tax levy. So we would have to be prepared to pay for that.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. Next speaker, Supervisor Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had another question I forgot. For like squad cams and body cams, I know we had talked about the issue of where all that is going to be stored. Has that been talked about? How is that being, how is that being talked about, or what's happening with that so far?
We have terabytes and terabytes of memory in our servers. As we continue to put on more body cameras, currently we have squad cameras, so in the squad car itself, and then we also have body cams for all of our patrol deputies. We're going to be adding some cameras to the deputies that work here, and we have discussed the idea of having some of our jail deputies wear them as well, so storage is a huge issue. We have opted to have our own storage through our IT department rather than renting storage from a company, and then I feel held hostage to whatever it is you have to pay. So we have opted to have our own. It is expensive, but it is the world that we live in. The expectation is any encounter with law enforcement will be videoed. So we have taken that on.
2 follow-up questions, if I might. My first question is, do you have any type of like policy in place or any procedure for when or for how it's stored or how long it's stored? And then the second question is, do you foresee, the county board having to take up maybe a proposal or something to pay for this storage? Because I can assume over time it's just going to become more and more of an issue as we run out of space.
It will. We have kept up and we have planned for the future. We know basically what storage we need currently and what we're going to need into the future, and we're fine right now. Problem is as it becomes, we just got new body cams. They are so clear that they're actually picking up more, I think, more than the human eye is, which is problematic for decision making and when you're judged. So the audio and video is just amazing, but it compresses it, which makes it, as it's more clear, it's more expensive to store. But we're prepared for that at this point. We're okay. We're working with IT to maintain those servers and look into the future. As far as the storage rates, we follow the state standard for storage, whether it be just a general contact between a citizen, or if it's a crime, or if it's a citation. There's a number of days, or for felony, it's we keep things until all appeals have been exhausted. So some of it, is from day one. We still have it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wojciechowski. Next speaker is Supervisor Singstock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, I'm referring to page 237. The line item is professional service. Statement says decrease based on a reduction of electronic monitoring inmates from 35 to 30. Would you please explain that?
Sure. Our jail population is changing, and we have less and less inmates that are eligible for GPS, and less inmates that are on GPS, as well as some don't want to leave the facility to work, can't pay the GPS fees, so they stay in our facility. And I would say that mainly it's our population is changing. We have a larger segment of non-sentenced inmates that would not be eligible for GPS until sentencing. So we're seeing a decrease there, which reduces the cost that we're paying to rent the GPS, but also the revenue that we receive from the inmate who pays for it.
So what you're saying, though, that's just an example of some situations we cannot hold down the population of the jail. Just impossible.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure. I think, we have to wait until the district attorney has an opportunity to look at what they are doing, and maybe we can make some kind of impact. But certainly, when I started at this in the county, we had a 113-bed jail, averaged like 65 inmates, 70 inmates. Well, it's changed dramatically since then, and I think as times change, so does that population.
Thank you, Supervisor Singstock. Next speaker, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to speak to what Supervisor Differding had mentioned about the telephone thing. I, too, was concerned about this some time ago, and I think over the last 18 months, the sheriff and I have spoken about a half a dozen times about this, and I did do some studies with other jails in other parts of the country, and this is while it feels wrong somehow that we're charging people who are probably already in a financial strait and can't afford, it seems to be the policy in jails all across the country that they're using telephone contract services as a budgetary revenue source. And yeah, it doesn't smell good, but it is being done all over. And as the sheriff said, he would have to increase the levy on that. So we're kind of stuck with a bad situation, unfortunately. That's what I would say. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker, Supervisor Lenz.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question, a clarification. Did you say that you have your own IT department, independent of the county's IS department?
No, we just work closely with our IT, like on a daily basis. I get complaints that we use them too much, but they're great to work with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Lenz. Next speaker, Supervisor Binder.
What was the length of time it takes, if, say you get arrested and you can't post bond, a cash bond, how long does it take to get to court to basically find out your faith? Is it a couple days, next day, on average?
Well, the bond hearing has to occur within 48 hours or a probable cause needs to be done by the judge. So typically, unless let's say you're arrested on a Friday night, you would go to court on Monday. But if you're arrested Sunday, you would go to court on Monday. So it's within 48 hours barring that Friday night arrest, which has to be reviewed by the judge on Sunday. And they can release just based on that probable cause statement. Typically do not, but it normally, I guess the answer is within 48 hours there's a bond hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Seeing no other call-ins, that will complete the sheriff's budget review. Thank you very much, Sheriff. We'll move next to the coroner's budget.
The chart of personnel for the coroner's office is on page 255. There'll be one full-time and one part-time employee, the same as in prior years. There's also deputies that are paid on a per diem basis for going on coroner's calls. The chart of significant changes is on page 256. And Kim Mackey from the coroner's office is in the back of the room if you have questions.
Any questions or comments in regards to the coroner's budget? I'll call on Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the significant changes, regular pay, wages are estimated to increase 10.2%. 2 employees, the coroner gets 4.5 based on a previous thing here, and the other one gets 2.5% approximately based on merit. How does that equal to 10.2%?
I'll call on the Finance Director.
Included in that is the per diems as well. And so the per diems have gone up 11%, but that is to even out, or to go by trend of where they've been trending. However, they've went up $20,000, but then pathology services and operating expenses went down by $20,000 because of the autopsies going to Milwaukee, and pathology services are included in that, but it takes more staff to get down to Milwaukee and back to view the autopsies and be there.
There's also an increase in the number of hours for one of the full-time employees one of the part-time employees is going to be budgeted for additional hours over their level last year.
From 25 to 28 hours.
Okay, then based on the per diems, my question to the coroner's office would be, how many per diem calls do we pay for versus how many deaths are there?
Oh, boy. Well, we pay per diem is per death, basically. The on-call coroners do get paid for being on call. That varies if they're on call for 24 hours, 12 hours, 4 hours, kind of depends on how we break it down. There's generally one coroner that's on call. Unfortunately, we do have times, today is actually one of those days, We have a coroner that's on call. We have another coroner that's actually in Milwaukee because we have 2 autopsies going on. They have to be present for those. That's all, everything that we have to witness, answer for the medical examiner, everything that we need to be prepared for should that case go to court. So today's a day where unfortunately it's expensive for us. We're paying for 2 of them. Generally, we try to have just that one, and then they are paid per call. If they do go on a death scene, whether it takes them 6 hours or 3 hours, they get paid $30. And that's just a blanket. It doesn't go per their hour or anything. It's just per their call. Does that kind of answer it, or?
I guess that doesn't answer my question.
No, I'm sorry.
I realize you're put on the spot here. I don't expect you to have that, but it's a question I would like answered.
With how many, well, they're only paid for their calls, so how many calls? Unfortunately, I mean, I do have numbers showing the increase in our numbers of deaths, so it does force an increase in their salary or their pay.
The finance director has a follow-up response in regards to
I
that
did want to
question.
also mention that the coroner's office has been involved in different pilot programs now.
I'm aware of all that.
Okay, and that does also take more time for the per diems.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kim, thank you very much for answering the questions that I sent you an email about, but I was still wondering about that. Item number 12 on page 254, continue to monitor quality of care given to individuals incapable of their own care. And I'm still kind of concerned how it is that a living person shows up on the coroner's radar, and how do you know to be concerned about a particular elderly or handicapped individual?
Well, actually, they don't show up on our radar. We don't know of them until that death is actually reported to us. And usually, typically when a death is reported to us, even if there is a medical condition present, if there are any injuries or recent falls or anything like that, that requires us to investigate. So unfortunately, with some circumstances, once we investigate and we realize that individual A was under the care of their family and the family chose to accept money from the state for that care, that's when we notice that there may be bed sores, there may be, I don't want to get too disgusting with you guys. We'll notice things that we say, oh, that's not right, or something did not go right here. So we'll investigate further, and we're looking for medical records, and we're making sure that medication that was prescribed was given, and we're looking for all of that. And when we see that that didn't happen, we report that.
Okay, so this is not monitoring the care given to living individuals. This is what you...
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That's what I was confused about. Thank you.
No, I understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker is Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question in regard to this increase for the secretary. I believe we reviewed documents that indicated that was because she was helping out with some kind of a pilot drug program. Is that correct?
I believe it was the suicide awareness
Okay.
program and the child death review.
Okay, and is that grant funded? Wasn't there a grant that was given to a different department?
Just for the overdose fatality review.
And that's a grant that public health has, and they are going to, in an amendment, be able to give $2,000 of that. That'll
Of the
come up.
grant through the coroner's office?
Correct.
To
Correct.
supplement that increase?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, so once that project is done, then we won't need this additional hours? Or is that a continuing thing into perpetuity here?
I'll let Kim answer that.
Right now, it appears to be a continuing, as it continues to be a problem, I guess is my best way to say that. And again, an increase, and I'll just cover the overdoses alone. With the increase that we keep having with that, that's why the state has created this program that they want us to look at it and dig down to see what are recommendations we should be making so we don't get to that point, so we're not having the overdoses, or we're trying to find, cracks in the system, so to say. So right now, until we can get this under some kind of control or have a better understanding of the epidemic at our hands and what we can do to not have as many deaths, or what we can do to try to get them off of their addictions or help them with that, there isn't really an end date, so to say, with it. Does that answer your question?
It does, but you're saying this is a request from the state of Wisconsin?
Correct. This is something that was brought on by the state.
Okay, so if the state is requesting this, why isn't the state paying for it?
Good question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Supervisor Bender.
I would just like to thank you for the service that the Corners Department does. The things that you see on a daily basis, I don't think the rest of us could basically sleep at night. I mean, there's nothing worse than walking into a house where somebody passed away 2 or 3 days ago, and you have to basically do an autopsy to find out what the cause of death was. I thank you for the service you do, and you do a
Thank
good
you.
job. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker is Vice Chairman Egan, followed by Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question for the Finance Department. Does everyone get paid the exact same on these special programs that works on them? Is everyone being paid?
Everyone on the opioid and.
Opioid, any of those, right, that the coroner's office is getting paid? Anyone that's on these special programs, is everyone getting paid for them?
They're getting paid for them at whatever wage rate they're at or per diem rate they're at.
So some could be a lot more. I'm just going to say the coroner, because it is the coroner, could get a lot more than, say,
Than
somebody
a
down lower.
deputy.
Yeah, that would
Correct.
be correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan.
Can I add a point that I'm not sure I'm understanding the question and the answer, but if deputies or the secretary of the coroner's office get paid while they're doing this work, they're paid by the county.
Correct.
And so most of the work we're talking about is being done by the secretary in that department. Kim Mackey was in the back. Or were you asking about a level of reimbursement from the state?
No, I was asking just what she answered. I want to know if everyone was being paid, and say, if like she went versus Mr. Bugsley went, would he get paid more than if what she went? And she did answer that question, and it all depends upon what level they're at. Thank you.
Next speaker, Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So these pilot programs that the state is mandating, how long has this program? When did this program start? And do you think that you are seeing some actual results from this? I mean, if we're going to be funding this, I'd like to see if we're actually going to be getting any results. I mean, when you looked at the program, did you think to yourself that yes, this could actually this will actually help? Or did you look at this and say, well, I'm not really sure what the state is going to get out of this?
I'm going to kind of try to break that down to how you asked it. It started in February of just this year, so we haven't had a full year of it yet. My original thought of it is this is great because I'm involved with the Child Death Review Committee, and from that committee alone, the recommendations we've made to save children's lives have improved that. And because that was a proven model, this, though it's overdose related, follows the same model of that. So I do believe that, yes, this is exactly what we need. We need to find out where we've got our cracks, where we're missing these individuals, and be able to get them before they decide to do something or take something to solve their problem that, you know, our community has this available. Or if we can lower costs of things for addicts, I think that could help them too. We really, because it hasn't even been a full year yet, we've been trying to review to see where it stands and what we've done. We're just getting to that point now where we've reviewed enough cases to be able to make recommendations. And I believe that's actually going to happen either at the December or January meeting. So I can't tell you that we've made a recommendation and I've seen a benefit from it yet, but I do expect that to be the case.
Thank you. I'll probably follow up in January or February when all the results are in, because I'd like to see this too. I mean, because it puts us a bit in a pickle because of the state just kind of came in and mandated this, and so now, you know, we have to increase our funding. So I'd like to make sure that, we're actually getting something out of it.
You and me both.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferty. Seeing no other call-ins, that concludes the coroner's budget review. Thank you, Ms. Mackey, for being here.
Thank you.
Supervisor Powers, did you have?
Are requesting a break, sir. Thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 10 o'clock.
The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly. The Winnebago County Board is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org.
If we
Please
all
stay
could
with
go
us.
ahead and
Coverage will
take our
resume
seats
shortly.
so we can reconvene. Okay, if we could all take our seats so we can go ahead and reconvene. We have just completed the coroner's budget, so the next budget is the airport budget. I'll call in Executive Harris.
The chart of personnel for the airport budget is on page 278. It calls for 8 full-time employees in 2019, the same as 2018. The summary of significant changes is on page 279, and the airport levy is decreasing from $839,000 to $810,000.
Questions and comments in regards to the airport budget? I'll call on Supervisor Brunn.
I'm wondering if we ever got the car rental agreement and the use of the space figured out, or a contract actually made. That was a big discussion last budget hearing.
And the
Jim
airport-
Shell's in the back.
The airport director's in the back. He should be able to answer your question.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the county board. Jim Shell, airport director out of Whitman. The question was, I believe, regarding the car rental agency. We do still have an ongoing agreement with the car rental agency. It's simply reverted to a month-to-month arrangement. I think I've mentioned at the county board in prior months, at a prior meeting. We still receive commissions from those rentals. We still receive rent payments from the occupation of the space in the current terminal facility. However, a long-term agreement is challenging until we chart the proper direction for a new general aviation facility or a reuse of the existing facilities that we have. And that's all, again, culminating, my plan is to present that at the January special orders meeting.
Thank you Supervisor Brun. Next speaker is Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shell, I have two questions. First one is on page 282, line item 51105. Overtime expenses went up substantially, 86% from $3,750 to $4,500. Can you explain that, please?
Yes, so over time, I believe in the last couple of years, especially in 2018, was quite understated for the actual amount of expenditure we were experiencing in those areas. And I will point out that a fair amount of our overtime is reimbursed through the Experimental Aircraft Association because of the extenuating preparations that are necessary for that event, for AirVenture. And so while the increase in the overtime expenditure category definitely jumps off the page there, if you look back to two things, I would say the actual expenditures from 2015 through 2017 in those areas, and then also the fact in another area of our budget where we're budgeting anticipated revenue for reimbursement of some of those expenditures through the EAA, it's essentially offset. So while there is an increase, there's also an increase in revenue as it's shown, I believe $21,000. I'd have to find that specific line item, which is a number of things, but one of them goes to compensating for some of our overtime costs.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 284, under utilities, line item 54702, water and sewer, also went up substantially, 60% from 224.5 to 360. Can you explain that, please?
Yes. So the $224,500 number that was budgeted for 2018, unfortunately for some reason that sort of defies explanation, that number was low. We did receive a credit from a project that we just completed from the city of Oshkosh for stormwater reduction, a reduction in our stormwater fees. However, if you look back to 2016, we kind of crested at almost $500,000 in stormwater fees to the city of Oshkosh. And then in 2017, that went down, I think partially due to that credit. In 2018, it was under budgeted. In fact, potentially going to have to come to the board for a budget transfer in 2018. Something that the finance director and I have been talking about. I think we may be able to absorb the overrun in that line item with our other utility underruns. But for 2019, the $360,000 number came directly from an estimate from the Public Works Director for the City of Oshkosh. Him and I sat down and really went over kind of the application of how these fees are charged. And so for my understanding, I have a pretty clear picture of how we're charged those fees. And the $360,000 number was an estimate that he gave me. They will, to my understanding, have an increase in their utility rates for stormwater fees, I believe in January. So unfortunately, I don't know what that increase is, and neither, I believe, does he. So the $360,000 number is straight from the City Public Works Director.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Any other questions or comments in regards to the airport? Seeing none, we'll complete that.
Oh.
Thank you, Director Schell. We'll move on to the Highway Department budget.
The chart of personnel for highway is on page 292. It's budgeted for 84 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. That's an increase of 1 full-time employee. The chart of significant changes in the budget is on pages 293 and 294. And there's 2 departments that almost have to be looked at together. It's the Highway Department and County Road Maintenance. The Highway Department is largely charged out to the state for the work we do on the state highways. And then the work on the county roads is in County Road Maintenance. And I believe the director's in the back.
Any questions or comments in regards to the highway budget? I'll call on first Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I might, I would ask the Highway Commissioner to give us a brief overview of the need for the additional employee. Now, obviously, this has gone through committee, approved and recommended, but I think it needs to be demonstrated to this body when you get out in the rural areas of this county, town roads, where they do a lot of work for us, which demonstrates the need for the new employee. So if you would elaborate on that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. The way we have through the process of going through the highway committee, working with the human resources department, it's evident, or it became evident to me, that our two patrol superintendents were working excessive hours, just trying to maintain our current workload to keep up with what we have going on. Essentially, they're getting burned out. The solution to this is to provide some relief to them by having two new supervisors in the highway department to assist them in completing that workload. What it involves is, we currently have 5 foremen. We would convert one of those foreman positions to a supervisor position, because currently the foremen are non-supervisory positions, and then we'd hire one new supervisor for a total of 2 supervisors to assist the patrol superintendents and the bridge engineering maintenance manager. Currently, the patrol superintendents are averaging 300 to 400 hours a year above and beyond their normal 40-hour work week that they just aren't being compensated for. They are salaried positions, so they do that work because the work needs to be done. And it isn't fair to continue to ask them to put in that amount of time year in and year out, and that a level of dedication without any relief. And that's why I'm asking for the 2 supervisor positions to provide that relief to them and to better serve our customers. The state is our largest customer, the Department of Transportation. We do a lot of work for our townships in the county. There's most of the townships in the county do work with us, not all of them. We do a lot of work on our own county highway system. We do a lot of our own paving and maintenance, all of our own paving and maintenance on our system, and also for other departments. We do a lot of work for other departments as well. So we are a very, very busy department. We operate very lean. We make do with what we have for our staff and our equipment, and I believe we provide a very good service to Winnebago County in that regard. So hopefully that answers your question, Chuck.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Faring. Next speaker is Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, the comic relief. I noticed on page 298, line item 52005, you had a 260% increase in meals. Does that mean you guys are serving donuts for the highway committee meetings? If so, I think I'll have to come. Okay, and then back to the real subject. I may have missed something, Ray, but nowhere in your results, accomplishments from 2018 or goals for 2019 do I notice the CB Oak Ridge interchange. Has that been put on a back burner, or where is that?
No, that is scheduled for construction for next year. That is a, as you recall, we did receive highway safety improvement funding for that project. It's being funded at 90% level. It is on deck for construction next summer, 2019, and that is a state-managed project. The highway department or the county really has no involvement in the construction of the roundabout. Essentially, they take over the project. When it's completed, then they turn it back over to the county.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Next speaker is Supervisor Bender.
I don't know if they changed the job description for your 2 road supervisors, but that job description states they work 50 hours a week, not 40. So a normal work week or year for them is 2,620 hours. When you add these two positions, are they still gonna be able to work their 50 hours a week? Because that's what their salary is based on.
Absolutely. They'll be able to better serve our customers by providing more service to the state and our local townships to better manage the workload that we have, most definitely.
And do you have a job description for the two new supervisors?
We did draft we have a draft job description. I'd be happy to read over the highlights of the duties if you'd like.
Please.
Okay, in the purpose and summary, it simply states, assist in the management of the Highway Department operations related to roadway maintenance and construction under the direction of the Highway Maintenance Superintendents, provides clear and cost-effective direction to staff, works closely with the department supervisory staff, and ensures a safe workplace practices are followed. Essential functions would be directing daily work crews, coordinating upcoming project labor, material and equipment needs, reviewing timesheets, coordinating digger hotline locate requests, track and tabulate project materials, prepare estimates, track project-related costs, and monitor state and county highways. Also, directs emergency response operations related to severe weather, motor vehicle accidents, and responds immediately to emergency-related needs on the county and state highway network. Organizes and distributes and delegates work to subordinates fairly and impartially. Provides clear and appropriate direction to employees. Provides training and coaching to subordinates. Ensures that staff has the resources and flexibility to perform, improve, and learn in their jobs. Keeps open communication with subordinates, listens to them, and provides feedback. Positively motivates, mentors, and leads employees. Provides appropriate and timely performance evaluations for all subordinates. Additional duties: participates in the selection of department employees, evaluates work performance, and issues discipline as necessary. They will plow snow in the winter. Requires daily equipment needs to the highway maintenance superintendents. Orders materials for use on maintenance and construction projects. Shooting and establishing grades and elevations. Maintains positive public relations. Fills in for the highway maintenance superintendents during absences. Serves in the highway department on-call roster for emergencies, and performs other related duties as may be assigned.
And then, your foremen are currently at a grade 24 pay scale. What would the pay scale be for them?
Foremen are 22. I believe these were 20. Or would they be hourly? Pardon? Yeah, grade 24, and they would be hourly positions. So
Okay. And then you currently have 4 supervisors that take vehicles home at night. Will these 2 supervisors again be taking vehicles home? So the county will be providing 6 vehicles to go back and forth from your house to work?
the intent is to allow supervisors who share or on call, they do take their vehicles home to be able to respond to emergencies as needed.
Now, do they have to live within the county, or can they take these vehicles even out of the county? And I see you got $90,000 in the budget for 2 new pickup trucks for your road supervisors. Are they allowed to take them to a different county?
You mean to live in another county?
If they live in another county and they're traveling 45 miles each way to work, that's permissible, I assume.
Well, we'd like to try to have our supervisors in at a distance that they're able to respond reasonably. It could mean another county.
You know, I can go along with taking the vehicles home, but when you're driving to a different county, I know you have one that lives in Stockbridge, and, you know, that's an awful lot of miles to put on a county vehicle every day going back and forth to work.
Well, I will say that that individual you're referring to is a very dedicated employee who does work a lot of time outside of his normal expected hours and is very dedicated. I think the county is definitely benefiting from him using his vehicle to be able to respond to emergencies, and basically at any hour of the day or night. I think the county is definitely benefiting from that.
I know when I worked there, there was one supervisor on call per week, so they're really only on call one. When you get the 2 new ones, they'll be on call once every 6 weeks.
They share in the on-call roster, and they are on call where they have to be home and available for that 1 week period. But there are often times in the middle of the night or on a snowy weeknight where they, something will happen where supervisors will have to respond even when they're not on call, and every single one of them is more than willing to do that and have done that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker is Supervisor Brun.
I just also am not happy with the idea of taking county property such as a truck out of our county to Stockbridge. Good employer or not, it sure is a huge benefit paying for gas to go to work and back every day versus someone that lives maybe in Amro or Oshkosh. Doesn't seem right. I'm sure the sheriff's department, if they had take-home cars, that they wouldn't let them go out of the county. I think he should park it at county line in Menasha and drive the rest of the way to Stockbridge, his own vehicle. And if we have to provide a vehicle, maybe we should be giving a smart car or a Toyota Camry or something that has good gas mileage rather than a $45,000 pickup truck. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brun. Next speaker is Supervisor Defferding, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also agree with that too. I think that instead of us just browbeating it, we could probably just propose a resolution and just be done with it and just pass it and just say that that has to stay within the county. And I would certainly support that resolution if that were come to pass. But that's not what I really wanted to speak about. I wanted to get some feedback from the department head in regards to the thing about highways is that they break down. They're just like cars; they break down over time. Maintenance costs is always going to be badgering us every year, and so I'd like to see. I get a feeling that we're kind of limiting ourselves on what materials that we use for our roads and for our highways. Have we looked into, and maybe this is something that the Highway Committee can help me on, is that is there other materials that we looked at to lower maintenance costs down the road, something that's stronger, maybe even look into recycled materials, or maybe we're already using that, and perhaps that could be a point of enlightenment for me. And also, I think that there's a lot of different experiments that we've been doing in the private marketplace that we could incorporate here in Winnebago County. For instance, like solar roadways, where we have solar panels that we could use as renewable energy sources that we could actually channel into some of our public facilities here. Has anyone in the department looked at those different things, like even like kinetic turbines for speed bumps, just different things that we could do to experiment to lower our costs down the road, lower our maintenance costs down the road. Wanted to know if you could give me some feedback on that.
We certainly look at opportunities that we can provide maintenance and construction on our county highway system that lower our costs. Being in the Midwest, we have to deal with 4 seasons of weather. A lot of the things that you refer to, may work fine in Nevada, but don't work so well in Wisconsin. So, we have to try to be reasonable about what we use to be provide the most cost-effective maintenance and construction services that we are able to. We do recycle as much as possible. All of our asphalt has 20 to 30% recycled materials to try to reuse some of those asphalt materials. So we try to reuse as much as we possibly can, because it certainly is cheaper for us to reuse resources that we already own.
Is the recycled material, is it does that do you think it's weaker than unrecycled material?
In some cases it is, in some cases it isn't. In asphalt, With the new technology with asphalt mix designs, there's a lot of science that goes behind designing an asphalt pavement. When you exceed a certain percentage, and for every mix design it's a little different, but when you exceed a certain percentage of recycled materials, it does degrade the asphalt itself and lower its life expectancy.
Thank you. Just one last comment is I do think that we should start experimenting, with with different ideas when it comes to our county roads. And some of the stuff that I just mentioned would be some ideas for us to explore in the future. Just a comment to the county board en masse. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Deffery. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to remind the board, within the past year and a half, I reported to the board that Winnebago County roads are within the top 3 conditions of all the roads in the 72 counties in Wisconsin, and that we're up there with Ozaukee County, which is the wealthiest county, and has the least miles of roads. So kudos to the commissioner for maintaining that status. And the other question I have for Ray, which predates his service to Winnebago County, was several years ago, the county executed a lease for the Tri-County Arena, which within 10 years would transfer title to the lessee. And my understanding is we had taken on the responsibility of grading the parking lot at the Tri-County Arena. It was potted holes. It was a very, very hazardous condition. Recently, I visited the facility and I observed that the parking lot was compacted. It seemed like there was some type of service to the road that compacted the rocks or the gravel down, and I'm wondering whether the highway department had something to do with that great improvement in the Tri-County's parking lot.
Actually, the agreement has expired between the county and the Tri-County Ice Arena. We have not done anything with them for over a year now. They had hired a private contractor to pulverize the existing asphalt pavement in their parking lot and compact it about a year ago, and I think they've been just maintaining that, but the highway department has not been doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Buck, followed by Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Eisen stole a little bit of my thunder here, but if you had to give Winnebago County roads a grade, what would you give them? Is there some kind of report card that you use? Question number 1. And question number 2, when was the last time we've done a cost analysis study with, I'm not sure what the percentage of the roads that Winnebago County paves itself to subcontracting that out to private contractors? Has that been done in the last year, 2, 5? And where are we at with that? Thank you.
Yes, all the county highways and all the highways in the state of Wisconsin and roadways are rated using a system called the PASER rating system. And if I recall, our county would fall in that 5 to 6 range as an average countywide on our county system. You know, we have some roads that are a little less, some roads that are in really good shape, with an average of probably around the 6 on an average would be my recollection. Have not done an analysis or comparison on private contractor costs versus county costs for paving. I don't know if one has ever been done, not to my knowledge, I guess, before I came here. I've been here for about 2 years now, so that's all I can answer. That's all I can answer with regard to that.
Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Next speaker, Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ray, I just want to say I've been observing you get beat up at a lot of meetings, and I was very excited to learn that you were lean certified. And so I'm actually going to issue a challenge to you, and that is, as I've listened to a lot of the discussion, it seems to be one of the things we struggle with is productivity, evidence of productivity and efficiency. And I'm going to challenge you to start looking at some key metrics that that would help us to have, understand how we're operating in your area. And I'm saying that because, again, I think that the whole process of establishing lean processes and metrics, so we can clearly understand the issues of efficiency in the county, would be very helpful. And since you have that background, I'd love to see it start in your department. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker, Supervisor Finch, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a little bit of a problem about the employees taking the truck or the vehicles home. And one reason in particular is that, all right, the person's out of done, he's done working, but he takes the vehicle home, and he or she gets into an accident. Who's liable because the person's in a county vehicle? Is the county liable? Is he liable? I strongly feel that they should not be allowed to take the county vehicle home. And that's why I'm going to vote no on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next speaker, Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me propose a little different point of view in regard to this vehicle that's being taken home. If we require this person to be available to this county, and in particular to the towns within this county, we have a response time that is critical. And in bad weather situations, if we have an emergency, they need to get to that point of the emergency. What we're saying is, well, you can't take the county vehicle home, so they'd have to drive from where they reside back to the county highway department, pick up the county vehicle to go to the emergency. So that's a bit of a key point. The other issue is if you're going to require them to be on call, then I assume you're going to pay them mileage from where they reside back to the county highway department. And, I mean, you need to do a cost-benefit analysis there, but currently it's what, 54.5 cents a mile, I believe? So if we have to pay that, that adds an additional cost also. You have to determine whether it's a better value to allow them to have that vehicle to respond to emergencies without any mileage reimbursement. So give that a lot more thought before we decide, well, it's just a bad policy. Because sometimes that policy, it appears to be bad, up front, but there's a very good reason for having it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker, Supervisor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, saying I agree with Representative Fari on that vehicle usage. Second thing I came across, and something a little bit different, is our county roads at night, in a lot of areas, there's very little light, and you get a foggy night, rain and fog, coming into some of these curves, you don't see the curve until you're actually upon it. And I'm just wondering if you've ever looked into the idea, and I've seen it used elsewhere, these little reflector squares on the shoulder of the road, so and embedded into the road itself, so your lights pick up those squares, and you realize that you're on an edge of a road coming into a curve. Have you ever looked into that?
If you recall, the state of Wisconsin, installed those reflective directional squares that you see on the center line of the highways throughout the whole state of Wisconsin. And because we live here in this state with 4 seasons, particularly in the winter, we deal with a lot of the frost thaw cycles. And those types of applications where you're embedding type things into the pavement have a tendency to want to come loose. And then our plows have a tendency to throw them off in the ditch or in the woods as they go by. They don't last very long. So, there are other methods available to us that we try to utilize. We use chevrons on curves that are lower speed. We have reduced speed ahead signs. We do paint white fog lines on all of our roads to try to make people aware that there is a change coming. Another thing I am looking at since I've been here is we do have a lot of curves that are on our highway system that would probably or more than likely be below what standards would be for the speed limits that are posted. Trying to evaluate those, and as we do projects, try to correct some of those deficiencies. That's something that will take a lot of time. We improve a little of some of them over time as we go along. But I think it's a good step for us as a county to look at some of those safety improvements and make those improvements as opportunities arise.
Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Supervisor Smith. Next speaker, Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a few responses here on the superintendent's job. As a lot of you know, I held that job for 14 years in my previous life. The first thing I want to comment on is the materials that Supervisor Defferding asked about, and sometimes you can find cheaper materials, but they're not good. You get what you pay for, and just as part of an answer to your question. The vehicle use. I had a vehicle to take home in those 14 years. Like Supervisor Fari said, I responded to things right outside my driveway. If it snowed at 2 o'clock in the morning, I got the call, I left and went right on the road. Many times there were emergencies, things that people didn't even realize. A Saturday snowstorm, and maybe Sunday it's okay, get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, go out and check the roads. Nobody even knows they're out there. As far as reimbursement for that, and Ray, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I held the job, the state, it's a contract with the state, and the state paid 40% of all that expenses, wages, vehicle use. They paid 40% of the mileage rate, which on average paid for that vehicle. The state wanted the superintendents to have a good vehicle. You had to have a four-wheel drive because sometimes you're out on roads that you're pushing snow with the bumper. Wanted us to have a vehicle that was dependable so that we could respond to things on that highway system. As far as the extra employee, I started the highway department back in the 70s. There was 2 highway superintendents back then already. 24/7 job, and that doesn't mean it was one at a time. Most of the times both of them were there. Over the years, you saw how the highway system has expanded, Highway 41, Highway 10, Highway 45. You think from back then to what it is now, it's just a lot of response and a lot of work. We tried creative things over the years to provide that help. One of them was going on when I retired 10 years ago, of 2 of the other management employees helping out in the winter. Of course, that took them away from their regular job. And that wasn't getting done properly. So I do support this additional help for that. Again, most people don't know all that goes into that job. I could rattle on here for 3 hours, and I'm not going to do that. I would say that if anybody wants to ask me questions afterwards, please do so. But I do support these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen.
Supervisor Ramos, if I could add one more thing?
Please, go right ahead.
Supervisor Rasmussen is exactly right. The state does pay and have an expectation that the superintendents have those vehicles available at their ready. I would like to add, though, too, that I was able to talk to the state Department of Transportation and get them to agree to fund 40% of our bridge engineering manager position. That is not reflected in this budget. It will be reflected in the 2019 through 20 routine maintenance agreement with the state that we have not received yet, but they have agreed to pay 40% of his salary and his vehicle use as well. So we are getting funding in from the state to help fund some of those needs.
Thank you. Have a couple more speakers. Supervisor Brunn, followed by Supervisor Eisen.
I'd just like to clarify my point about the vehicle. I'm not opposed to bringing the vehicle home. I'm opposed to bringing it to the Stockbridge, which is like 35 miles away. That doesn't help your response time at all, living that far away, if he's got his own truck or county truck. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brunn. Supervisor Eisen.
Yes, I have a vague recollection that the past highway commissioner for Winnebago County lived in Manitowoc County. So I would ask for someone with a better knowledge of that to confirm it. But I think if you're going to talk about outside of the county, I think you may want to think in terms of, for years, we had a very effective highway commissioner that traveled that distance.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. If someone can confirm it, we'll let you know. Seeing no, we have one more speaker, Supervisor Fari.
My memory tells me, and sometimes it's flawed, but Mr. Eisen is probably correct.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Seeing no other, we have one more, Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you. That is correct, but I do not believe he took a vehicle home. I believe he drove his own. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Seeing no further call-ins, that will conclude the Highway Department budget. Thank you very much, Commissioner Polonin, for being here. So moving on down to the next budget, and that would be child support.
The chart of personnel for child support is on page 327. For 2019, they're budgeted for 26 full-time employees, the same as 2018. The summary of significant changes is on page 328. Child support costs are reimbursed by the state, and because some other departments perform services for child support that can also be billed to the state, it generally generates a cash flow surplus. So last year's surplus was $29,000, and this year's surplus is projected to be $55,000.
Any questions or comments in regards to the child support budget? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next budget, and that's human services.
The chart of personnel for human services starts on page 360. Okay. Human services is budgeted for 262 full-time employees and 23 part-time employees for a total of 285. That's an increase of 5 full-time employees and a decrease of 2 part-time employees for a net increase of 3. The chart of significant items is on page 361. Their levy goes from $18,073,000 to $18,242,000.
Questions in regards to the human services budget? I'll call on Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, a little comic relief. I noticed, Dr. Topol, on page 357 that all your 2019 goals and objectives are listed in the past tense. Does that mean you've got them all done and are looking for something to do, or?
They're reversed. So if you go where it says accomplishments, it's actually our goals and objectives.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen.
I was also going to point that out, so I know there's somebody else besides me that read the budget. On page 4 of the Human Services Budget Book, there's a category called Economic-Based Support. And it states there that economic-based support is provided to 52,933 persons in Winnebago County. Could you explain
I
that?
know the number.
Thank you.
I know the number. Yes, our economic support division, which is one of 5 divisions of my department, is responsible for federal programs that are run through the state and to us. And those are programs in 3 specific areas. They're the areas of applications for Badger Care, which is our Medicaid program. There are applications for federally subsidized child care, and the third one, and the third major area is for food share. So when we look at 50,000 or so recipients of service, they're receiving or have applied for one of those 3 large programs, and there may be some duplication in those numbers, but we can't tease them out. So we look at it in terms of who has applied for one or more of those services, and that's 50,000 individuals, families.
I have another, thank you. I have another question related to an issue I had brought to the county executive's attention yesterday. In the 2017 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, on page 29, it states that the Human Services Fund had a surplus of about $3,600,000 for the year, and but unbudgeted revenues of $2,600,000 were reimbursements from the state for prior years' comprehensive community services and economic support enhanced funding. And then it goes on to say, the tax levy transfer to the fund was reduced by $3,100,000. And my question is, what happened to the $3,100,000 that we levied before we knew that the $2.6 million was going to be reimbursed? And in years 2016 and 2015, there were similar episodes where surpluses were accommodated, and what happened to those monies?
I'll first call on the finance director to answer, at least start the answer to that question.
So those monies we budget that we're going to apply the general fund balance, but when we get this extra money back, instead of applying that balance, we don't have to apply it, and then if there's excess after that, then it goes back to the general fund. So it builds our general fund balance.
So that $2,600,000 was returned to the general fund.
That we were going to apply, are you talking about the DHS money, or that we were going to apply?
Yeah, that was the extra money that
Yes.
that came back. The other 600,000, I think.
That comes back this
If I recall
year.
what it said, I think it said the 600,000 was returned, but I want.
The 600,000 will be returned this year. At year end, we had less cash balance for the Department of Human Services and more receivables, so we didn't want to put them in a negative cash flow. So we're returning the other 600,000 this year in 2018.
Okay, so this is an annual condition?
No, these were monies that we weren't expecting from the state. Bill could probably elaborate on that, but we weren't expecting those, so we could not budget for those, and that's why we thought we were going to be applying general fund balance, but in the end did not need to, and in fact had excess.
So Mr. Eisen, all of the monies that were in excess of what we needed to expend went back to the general fund. What Vicki is talking about is some of the money had to be held over in our account to this year for financial reasons, and it was actually returned just a month or two ago back to the general fund. So all of the monies, none of the money disappeared, all of it went back to the general fund. What I want to say about that very unusual situation of 2017 was that it was totally unexpected on our part to receive such a large surplus. Part of it had to do with the state of Wisconsin making a $500,000 error in our favor, which our staff actually pointed out to them, and we were successful in our talking with the state that they had actually provided us with revenues, so they actually made us whole. So $500,000 of that was for that reason. And then what ends up happening every year is the state of Wisconsin makes an application to the federal government on behalf of all the counties for all the work that we do that is not compensated correctly by the feds or by the state. They send a claim to the federal government. The federal government takes a better part of a year, sometimes 2 years, to make up their mind how much they want to reimburse the state of Wisconsin. It comes back to the state of Wisconsin now 2 years later. The state of Wisconsin decides how much it's going to take as its oversight, I'll call it that. We could use other words for it. But it takes a percentage that they don't tell us what that percentage is. And then at the end of this year, again, we will get some unknown amount of revenue reimbursement back from the feds that is potentially 2 years old in terms of how we, so it's a very, I can attest to this, it's very difficult for my staff to track dollar for dollar where is this money coming from and what can we account, how can we account for this. So the best we can do is not to include it in our budget estimates for what's going to happen next year because we really don't know. And if we start to make projections, say for instance, if we started to make projections on the 2017, which was a very unusual outlier, I can count on that there probably going to be some surplus. I don't know if it's going to be a few $100,000 or it may be a couple of $1 million. I'm not at all certain what it's going to be. So we can't put that into the budget for next year. We know that it potentially is coming. Here's the good news for Winnebago County. If it does come in, even late in the year, it is not money that we are going to expend. It's going to sit there until the accounts are resolved, and it's going to go to the general fund. So all of these monies that come in excess of what we need to use in human services actually goes back to the general fund, and then all of you can decide how you want to use that revenue in years going forward. We don't have a designated fund. We don't keep money back from you, so it's all in your general fund to use as you wish to use it. So, and again, thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Eisen. 2017 was the most unusual year. I can tell you this year I give the county executive updates on what I think the amount's going to be, and right now our best estimate is somewhere between $800,000 and maybe $1 million that we might have surplus at the end of the year. But again, that kind of depends on how the rest of the year goes, and my placement costs, especially for child welfare and for inpatient hospitalization, can vary a lot depending on what happens. But right now, our best estimate, and I've given this to the county executive, is right around $800,000 to $1 million that we may be in surplus by the end of the year. But again, I want to caution everybody, we do have a few more months of expenses. So that's how I tend to do it with the county executive, is give him regular updates throughout the year as to how we're looking in terms of our budget.
Thank you. And one last question is, what kind of performance measures do we use, or could you share with us for the 45 or so programs that you administer, and the 150 contract firms that we do business with for various placements and services. Is there some way that the department would be able to share with the board an overview of, is the money that we're giving to, say, REACH, is that going to accomplish the goals that the money is intended to?
So for each program that's administered, that we administer for the state of Wisconsin, that comes from the federal government, comes with a set of requirements and a set of metrics that we have to then apply to how that service is going. So they're all varied. And some it might be as simple as, counting service units. Others have to do with surveys of client satisfaction. There are just a few categories of service in the Human Services budget which are called grants. And grants, we don't have very many of them at all, but when it's considered to be a grant, historically there haven't been any parameters put on those. And you mentioned REACH is one, the warming shelter is another, comes to mind. These are grants that we give to a couple of organizations in the community, and we're not asking them for data about how they use it. We're giving them a general use requirement that we want them to, in the case of REACH, we would like them to do sexual assault counseling for children that are victims of sexual assault, but we don't require them to give us any data about that. We're looking at, in the years to come here, changing all of our just grant-based grant-based allocations to a more fee-for-service type of allocation, where we actually are going to specify perhaps that we're going to do a provider contract, which is more in line with, if you provide a certain service with a certain amount of satisfaction to our satisfaction, then we will pay you for that particular service. And most of my services are set up in that way, and we can check on a monthly basis how many units of service we're getting, and we are checking with the recipients of service how satisfied they feel with that service, and we can also assess based on how they're coming along as to whether or not it's being productive. So these are the kinds of things we do. We don't do one type of survey for all of these programs. It is based on whatever Madison and the feds typically tell us that they want us to do.
Well, I could share with you, for having been here for a decade, conducting the business of the people, and having sat through a dozen budget sessions and observed the goings-on, I think it would be in the interest of the electors and the citizens of Winnebago County, as well as the board, to get some kind of feeling about the successes that we have had with many of these programs, whether it's a grandparent program or whether it's whatever form of the program, and there's got to be at least 3 dozen, 4 dozen programs that are administered through Human Services. We breeze by it and we see the monies, the line items in the budget, but it doesn't give us any of those performance measures that saying we're getting the sufficient bang for the buck.
I think we can see if in the future, maybe there's an opportunity to special orders where maybe might be able to.
Yes, and
review
we are
some
just
of
on that point, my staff and I are working on, we've never had, since I've been here in 11 years, we haven't had an annual report that we can make available to you. We want to do that. So I believe in this year, we will be working on an annual report format that will give it to you in paper format, and then I could also come and review that with you if you would like at one of your special orders meetings.
Sounds good. Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Albrecht, followed by Supervisor Konecki.
I just wanted to thank you for building our reserves to $18+ million.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Next speaker, Supervisor Konecki, followed by Supervisor Singstock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Ramos. Dr. Topol, page 368, item 53508, emergency rent assistance, and an increase of 133.33%. Will you elaborate on that, please?
Is that in the child welfare? Just give me a second. We're checking on which division that's from, and I want to make sure I give you the right answer. Could you say the page again, please, and the number?
Page 368, item 53508.
Oh, child welfare. Okay. So under emergency rent assistance, that's in our child welfare division, and the state of Wisconsin is completing a 5-year additional funding for counties to perform post-reunification services, and they're providing all of the dollars for that. And one of the categories that we needed to add was for rent assistance. So what that means is if we have a family and their child is returning to them after being served in one form or another in our child welfare system, we can help them with rent assistance, not ongoing indefinitely, but I believe for at least a month, maybe a few. And again, this money is coming from the state of Wisconsin to us in this particular program. So we're using it to try to help stabilize some family situations until they become stable, and so that we can keep families together and and housing is certainly an instance where we need to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Konecki. Next speaker, Supervisor Singstock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to refer to page 360. I'm referring to the chart, the chart on the left-hand side that's titled Change in Levy from Prior Year. As you can see, over that 7 years, there's been a very small impact on the tax levy. So for the size of their department, I think they're putting a lot of effort in trying to watch. They're putting a lot of effort in their impact on the tax levy, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. But like anything, there's still more progress to be made.
Thank you, Supervisor Singstock. Seeing no further call-ins, that'll complete the Human Services budget. Thank you, Dr. Topol, for being here. So we will move on next to the next department, which would be Parkview Health Center.
The chart of personnel for Parkview Health Center is on page 404. For 2019, they're budgeted for 215 full-time positions and 10 part-time positions, the same as the prior year. Their summary of significant changes is on page 406 and 407. And the tax levy for the department is decreasing from $1,628,000 to $1,599,000. And as you'll recall, I mentioned in my opening statements that in this department we made a large adjustment which has to do with budgeting as if every position is filled for the entire year. We know that we're unable to keep all the positions at Parkview filled consistently over the course of the year, so we've built a large adjustment into this budget representing positions that will be vacant for part of the year. And the nursing home director's in the back of the room for any questions.
Any questions in regards to the Parkview budget? I'll call on Supervisor Binder.
I guess as a board, what could we do to make it so there'd be more CNAs available to Parkview? I know every time you're down one, I mean, you usually run a ratio of probably 10 to 12 to 1 CNA to 1 patient. And if you're down 2 or 3 CNAs, that's less care that the residents are getting. What could we do to help you to make it easier to fill those positions?
Sure. As a board, I think there's a lot of, some opportunity for some legislative action as far as decreasing some of the regulations and the barriers that it takes to become a certified nursing assistant. Actually, at our last legislative committee, I brought up a topic for discussion at our next board meeting that is going to be helpful with facilities who receive certain state citations through the survey process. Currently, how that happens is if you receive a higher level citation at a certain level, you're unable to train CNAs for 2 years. Despite whether you fix that problem or what's going on with that. So that's just an example of a legislative opportunity that we can to help improve more CNAs to be able to come into the field. Also, as a facility, we're just working on, different recruitment techniques, looking into different areas of the community that maybe we haven't looked at before. Some of the older populations, how can we get them more involved in, the CNA work, the immigrant populations, and just trying to think outside the box. And I guess as a board, if there is anything that were to come up in the future, resolution-wise, just supporting anything that would remove any of those barriers to become a CNA.
Thank you. And
Sure.
basically, at Parkview, I'd say you're second to none. It's a great nursing home. I had family and friends there, and staff is always friendly, and, my hat's off to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker, Supervisor Eisen.
Yes, thank you. Marley, could you share with the board and the public when the debt on Parkview is going to be paid up? Seems to me we're getting towards the end of the 10-year cycle.
I have Tom in the back here. Right, yep. Yep, so the main debt for the main building is done. The addition that we did in 2012? 2012, did we do the addition? Yeah, right, the addition that we did for the therapy in 2012, that's just the debt that we're paying on that right now. So in the next couple of years, that'll be done as well.
So the $24 million that went into, this board, the then board authorized has been paid off?
Yes, for the main building.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. I'll call on Executive Harris.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to the board that the debt service you incur from upgrading or expanding a nursing home facility, that's part of the formula for your reimbursements. So in theory, you're being reimbursed. They may actually do it on a basis of depreciation, but it's calculated into your reimbursements from the federal government for medical assistant clients, for different things. And I'm sure Marlia knows it much better than I, but basically that does affect what you're reimbursed, and you do collect that money back over time. And I just offered that because I wasn't sure if the board was fully aware of that.
Thank you. Seeing no other call-ins, that will conclude the Parkview. Thank you very much for being here. So we'll move on down to the University Extension. And just so everyone's on the same page, what we'll do is we'll continue with the budgets. We will stop sometime between 11:30 and 11:40. Should give us plenty of time then to be able to travel to American Legion Post for lunch. So moving on next. Next department budget is University Extension.
The chart of personnel for UW Extension is on page 433. They're budgeted for 4 full-time positions. That's a decrease of 2 full-time positions from the prior year. And their chart of significant changes is on page 434. The levy is increasing from 601,000 to 619,000. In UW Extension, there are employees that are employed solely by the county, as well as employees that are supplied by the state. And the director can help explain that if you have any questions.
Any questions in regards to the UW Extension budget? I'll call on Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Catherine, good to see you again.
You too, Chuck. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. When I looked at this page, the first thing I noticed, of course, is the reduction of employees from 6 to 4. And then I'm thinking, well, what position was reduced?
So actually, the chart
Can you explain that?
Yeah, the chart now that you're looking at, and I'm looking at it here as well, those are county employees. Those are fully funded county employees. So that's just our support staff and our one educator. So in the past, they've included all of our employees on this chart, and that switch was made at some point in the past, and I'm not sure when that switch happened, but we have, and last year we moved one of our county employees to be a state employee. So that change is really just one employee difference between last year's and this year's. And I've communicated with Vicki and Mike about that chart in terms of the differences in those types of employees.
So there's no position loss then?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No.
Then it begs the question, because we're not basically charting state employees, is that what I'm hearing?
They're reflected in the table, the chart, but not the table. Maybe I'm using the wrong word. They're
Okay.
in the chart.
But don't we, I don't know how that happened or why, but don't we support financially 40% of that state employee's salary and benefits?
Correct. The county does contribute to a portion of, it's now a flat fee service.
Oh, so
Flat
it's no
fee.
longer a percentage.
It's not a percentage,
Yeah.
it's a flat fee for our state employees, which are co-funded by the county. Yep. And so those are indicated in the chart with a single asterisk on those positions. Yep.
Okay, then the question goes back to the county exec. Why aren't those 2 employees still included?
Yeah,
Because we are funding part of their salary.
Right, so they would show up as contracted services, and I'm not sure the line
Oh, as a
item.
contracted
But they're
service.
reflected differently in the budget, and that's why when I
Well,
brought
I'm
up the
just
chart.
asking, why was that change made?
What was the question?
I mean, it wasn't that way before, so why are we changing it now? Explain
Yeah.
that to me.
Vicki might be able to answer that better, but the point, that's why I brought up when I talked about the chart of accounts, talking
Yeah.
about
Yes.
how there was 2 groups of employee, ones that were directly employed by the county, and others
Partially employed
that were
by the-
provided through the state. And I suspect that that's what's happened here, and maybe Vicki could give you a better explanation.
Okay.
Actually, Mike puts those together, so Mike's going to give that explanation here.
Okay, Mike's gonna do, all right.
I don't know that I can really explain this, but I can tell you that when I started in 2013, I looked at that table of organization for the department, and it didn't make any sense. There are really more categories of employees really than we've even mentioned. There are state employees that the county pays the entire salary of. There are state employees that the county pays nothing for. There was a distinction between faculty members and other staff employees. I couldn't tell from the table of organization that I saw in 2013 really what the rule was about what was included and what wasn't. So essentially, we've tried to straighten that out gradually over a period of years by taking the ones that made least sense to me and kind of reorganizing them in the chart. So over a period of several years, we've moved toward what I think is a more consistent view, more consistent with the way we do tables of organization for other departments, which is just to list the county employees. So with this year, the 2019 table of organization, we've reached that level where I think we're now being fully consistent and only listing county employees in the table of organization with contracted employees shown in the chart, the organizational chart that shows the different functions of the department, and of course included in the budget as contract services, but not listed in the table of county employees, which should be only county employees in regular positions.
Follow-up question, given that explanation, and I thank you for that, then I need to ask, who are the two contracted employees, or if not their names, their positions?
There's more than two. So we have, if you look at the chart, we have agriculture, our 4-H program, community development, our family living educator is a state employee, horticulture is a state employee, different funding sources though, so.
Yeah, now these are now called contracts.
So these are all, yes, those are
Okay,
all
that's a
under our
new term.
contract.
All right.
Yep, under, it, which is a different line in the budget, correct.
I'm not finding that, but I'll accept that.
Contracted services,
Okay, thank you.
got it, okay.
Well, I appreciate the explanation.
Thank you, Supervisor.
That is quite a change.
Thank you. Next speaker is Vice Chairman Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Without going into any names, I hear that we're losing some real good people out there. But the one that I guess I'm concerned with being associated with the fair is, are we still going to have a 4-H agent just for Winnebago County? Can you answer me at this
Yeah,
time?
we're doing our final interviews tomorrow.
But will it be just for Winnebago County or will we be sharing?
No, we have a full 4-H program coordinator position for Winnebago County.
Thank
Yep,
you.
Yep.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Egan. Seeing no other call-ins, that would complete the UW Extension budget.
Thank
you, Ms. Weiser, for being here. So we will move on to the Parks budget.
The chart of personnel for the Parks Department is on page 444. For 2019, they're budgeted for 7 full-time and 2 part-time employees, the same as in 2018. The chart of significant changes is on page 445. The tax levy from the Parks Department is going from $1,290,000 to $1,288,000.
Questions and or comments in regards to the Parks budget? I'll call on Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob, could you comment in respect to the proposed amendment to purchase the property at 770 County Road Y? We did have an entrepreneur who had addressed the board last evening pleading for our consideration of his enterprise. Could you state the issue with that property? Because I know we're going to see it in the amendment, and while you're here, we can get it straight from the director.
Well, until about an hour ago, I wasn't familiar with the party that had shown up last night. I've not had any communication with them. I knew of them as part of the process of looking into the property, what I'll define as the south 20-acre parcel. That's the Netzer parcel. Everybody should be familiar with what was purchased several months ago. That was the north 20-acre Netzer parcel that was purchased for the Expo Center and its needs as far as expansion off to the east and accommodating the programming that, the tight programming space we have there for horse shows and so forth. So again, not to be confused with that north 20 acres. This is a parcel to the south of that that has the homestead on it and also connects up with East County Road Y. Now, in talking with the Netzer's real estate agent, she made me aware about a week and a half ago that there was another party, probably 2 weeks ago, I think, at this point, but another party, a family, and a developer. She would not explain who and so forth, very gray in providing much of information, but she did describe the family as being very interested and motivated in the property. However, Now, in working with the committee on this, we were already moving forward with the full purchase of the 320 acres. So I'm not sure what's been mixed into it with the family. I know the real estate agent has talked about the proposal, I guess, and this, I don't know if it was coming from the real estate agent or the family, about being able to partition off a portion of that lower 20 acres, that a corridor would be made available, which we are very interested in. I mean, that's one of our main desires in purchasing that property, is another corridor off of East County Road Y to get back to that back 20-acre parcel. So that's key to this whole project, really. So I don't know if they brought forward, the family talked about a proposal, or they're talking about an entire purchase of the property. I'm without knowledge of where they're going with it. But that was in the conversation early on, but it was decided that we would continue pursuing the whole purchase with the 320-acre parcel, and the property it would bring beyond the corridor as well.
So are you stating that there is a need for the county to purchase this property? Or is it just a want?
No, I don't know if you've seen the amendment yet. Have you been privy to the amendment, if it's been laid out in front of you?
It's in there someplace, it's
Yeah.
been issued.
Right, if you haven't seen it, it has 4 key points for the purchase. Well, perhaps you want to take time. I see some of you probably have it up. Over and above the access to the property to the north, again, the access off of East County Road Y, we would like to have that not only for purposes of facilitating the promoters that would use the property out in that area, such as, if you recall, there was a gentleman here during the purchase of the North 20 acres, PGI, that's the Pyrotechnic Guild International. That's a huge event that was held here at one time up at 141 Speedway. And the size of that would basically occupy the entire expo center, and then some. So when you're talking about access points for the event that size, it's critical to have other areas available other than these main ones where you're involving a camping and so forth. So we're trying to draw more programming out in that area and making it possible for this particular programmer to be able to gain access. Now, beyond that, we also have concerts that we're going to have that are going to occupy the entire grounds. They're going to be out into the east end as well. And that corridor is going to be crucial in order to facilitate some of the EMS and the security, the safety for access into that east side of the expo. Now, I've talked to the sheriff on this, and they do have a concern outstanding right now that we do supply some sort of routing other than what we currently have with that small dirt road, single-lane dirt road. So he would like to see that as well, that we put another portal, if you would, on that east end and get direct access to the north. Besides that, I know that UW Extension is also going to be, if they continue with that program for the community garden, that this would also serve as a site for that. Now, I don't want to get into that. That's not my territory. Maybe Catherine will speak on that later. But those are the main features of why we need the property. Finally, the community park in the past, if you've been out there with Life Fest and so forth, you can see how congested it is. And we try to continue our programming in the community park and often have conflicts with it. And what we're trying to do is get things that are expo-oriented over on that side of the road. So we're not competing with East County Road Y and pedestrian crossing of it during high-volume events. Again, it's a safety issue that we're trying to alleviate and trying to pull all of that activity over there. The community park has stepped up several notches over the last couple of years in its amount of activity. The road system, the shared use path have all helped that, and it's only rising. So more tournaments are likely to come in, Next year, we're going to have another conflict with Oshkosh Youth Soccer, their tournament, their Saturday tournament, as well as Life Fest, occurring at the same time. And that will happen on and off into the future. It's only going to be compounded as we get more tournaments in there too. So the attempt is to pull that programming, get it over on the east or the north side of the road, and hopefully almost entirely into the expo area.
Well, I hate to put a damper on the hopes and dreams, but I think that this county needs a command post for $320,000 more than it needs an extra 20 acres.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, Supervisor Gordon, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Rob, I was wondering, was this parcel not available when the other 20 acres on the back part of the property was?
It originally
considered?
started out as a $510 package with both parcels. Last spring, the Netzers opted to split it up. They were willing to because the upper portion of it was mainly farm fields and so forth. So we did decide to go with that portion. We were still interested in the lower, obviously. We did manage to bring the price that they had asked down quite a ways with the intent that, again, we'd revisit it possibly. If it stayed on the market, it would start going down. But I think what's boosted some of the interest in it now, there is other parties that are going after it. So that's why it's stepping forward again.
So would the intent be to pave over part of this parcel and then have the community garden? I know you're not into the specifics, but would it be like an access road into that part of the park?
Yeah, unfortunately, I was hoping you would have the map. I could have explained it off of that, but yes, the parcel is split down the middle with maybe you do have it. Okay. On the back side? Okay, well, if you refer to it, you're seeing the parcel split down the middle with what is their service road to the homestead up at the top near that barn. And there's talk of the, just to orient you, again, the top of the page is to the north, by the way. And East County Road Y is at the bottom. You can see the bottom part of it partially cut off. So on the left side of that picture, that is about a 4 to 5 acre field that the intent, if this were purchased, would go be dedicated to the community garden. So that access road, if you go straight up, would and minus the barn, minus the house, which we would eventually take down, that road would allow access into the back area, straight up into that farm field, and then north of that is where our parcel starts up. So right about where the picture cuts off is where we currently own that parcel, and it continues as a farm field. So that whole north area becomes available. Again, just back to the community garden, I think that was your original question, how that works in.
Yes.
Yeah, the idea would be, and this is real preliminary, that access road would be expanded, that if nothing else, some parallel parking would go along that entire length and still leave that access road open, available for what we need in the back half of the property. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gordon. I'd ask that if there's much discussion or questions in regards to this parcel, since this is going to be an amendment later today, I guess I would ask that we hold some of those questions when we're actually bringing up that amendment later this afternoon. I'll call on Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Lautenschlager.
I'll refer to the amendment when it's brought up. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. I'll call on Supervisor Lautenschlager, followed by Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to talk a little more on this community garden, Rob, because what you want to establish out there is a permanent community garden, because the current community garden on Snell Road that is occupied every year, I mean, every plot is rented on there, is going away. We will not have that anymore. So what we're looking at is a replacement for our current community garden, because
people won't be able to plant on the current one on Snell Road,
It's my
or on
underst-
Sherman Road.
Yeah, I don't mean to speak for UW Extension, but yeah, it's my understanding that the DNR is ending that lease on that property.
Right.
So after next year, it's terminated.
So that's why some of this property will be, hopefully,
As a permanent site?
permanent site for a community garden that we're losing.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you Supervisor Luttensugar. I want to make sure we keep that discussion when we bring up the amendment in regards to the property. Next speaker would be Supervisor Rasmussen, followed by Supervisor Brun.
Mine's on the property, I'll wait for later.
Thank you Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker, Supervisor Brun.
Mine regards the opposite. I'm wondering on page 443, I'll just read the goal and objective. Facilitate sale of 4-acre parcel of land adjoining Grundman Boat Landing that holds little potential for future recreational development and is becoming increasingly problematic due to encroachment issues. I guess I'd like an explanation of what your thoughts are on and what you're going to do with that, Rob.
Sure. It's a parcel that has been with the park since I began, and it's nestled between a residential area and a marsh on the back side. As far as its usable property, I'd say it's maybe a half acre of linear corridor along Grumman Lane. So it's, as far as building and so forth, or facilitating anything of programming nature, it's really limited. And what we've been experiencing there are the residents who have been, a few of them been inclined to dropping some of their grass clippings, I think some housing of cut wood there and so forth. So in all honesty, we have no use for it because it's, again, down and away from Drummond Boat Landing. So as far as a programming site, it wouldn't serve any need that the Parks Department has.
What are you intending on doing with it, though?
Putting it on the market, and there has been some interest from some of the property owners.
Thank you Supervisor Brun. Seeing no other call-ins, that will conclude the Parks Department budget. Thank you, Director Wade, for being here. So we'll just do one other budget. We'll do the Register of Deeds budget, and then once we're completed with that budget process, we'll plan on taking a break for lunch. So next budget would be the Register of Deeds.
The chart of personnel for the Register of Deeds is on page 465. For 2019, they're budgeted for 7 full-time employees, the same as for 2018. The summary of changes is on page 466. And their tax levy is going from $381,000 in the 2018 budget to $386,000 in the 2019 budget.
Questions or comments in regards to the Register of Deeds budget? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Strohmeyer.
Thank you.
For being here today. That'll conclude the Register of Deeds budget. Then I would entertain a motion to recess for lunch. Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are in recess. Thank you all. We'll reconvene at approximately between 1:15 and 1:30. We would be coming back here with the students, so we'll all be convening at the
accessibility
same
and
time.
understanding of
Students will
local
take their
government,
chairs back.
helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly.